show you guys my teacup and my teapot collection, and I talk a little bit about the history behind tea. Okay.
How was tea discovered? How has it affected cultures? And how does a beverage that virtually only grows in tropical climates become quintessentially British? Firstly, archaeological evidence shows that tea was first harvested about 1,500 years ago, and tea plants were initially chewed on its leaf, rather than seeped into water creating a beverage. They practiced chewing on leaves in the Chinese provinces of Yunnan and Sichuan for thousands of years before 2500 BCE, which is when popular opinion and legend says. There are several ancient Chinese legends surrounding the discovery of tea. Many Chinese legends are dedicated to the topic of the creation of tea. A few of these are as follows. According to one legend, the origins of tea began with a fictional farmer and emperor named Shen Nung. He was one day looking for edible plants to eat, but while doing so he poisoned himself. He was feeling ill and was going to die until a tea leaf fell into his mouth, and he was then revived and saved. Another legend of the same character was when an emperor was boiling some water to make it safe to drink when some leaves fell into it. Other legends include one where a few villagers were taunting some monkeys. In retaliation, the monkeys began to throw leaves and branches at the villagers. How tea leaves exactly ended up in the water is not described, though. Another legend I came across that was particularly interesting was that of Bodhidharma's eyelids. He was a Buddhist monk who, in order to focus on meditation more, he decided to never sleep again. He was so upset when he eventually fell asleep that he ripped off his eyelids and threw them to the ground. In a few years, he returned to the spot where he threw his eyelids to the ground, and there grew tea plants. Before the spread of tea, and after hundreds of years of variation, the standard form of making tea was heating and packing it into cakes, grinding them, and mixed with boiling water. This became known as a beverage called matcha. Matcha became extremely popular and was one of the first scenes of tea culture in China. The topic of tea became the subject of books and poetry. One poem by Chao Zhen during the Tang Dynasty goes, "A friend presented me with tender leaves of oolong tea, for which I chose a kettle of ivory-mounted gold, a mixing bowl of snow-white earth, with its clear, bright froth and fragrance. It was like the nectar of the immortals. The first bowl washed the cobwebs from my mind. The whole world seemed to sparkle. A second cleansed my spirit like purifying showers of rain. A third, and I was one of the immortals. What need I now for austerities to purge our human sorrows? Worldly people, by going for the wine, sadly deceive themselves, for I know the way the tea is real." Tea eventually spread from southern China to the north with the help of traveling monks, who carried the leaves with them to make their preferred drinks. Tea helped the monks stay awake during their long meditations. These monks would typically add things like onion, ginger, and orange to their tea. Tea was a very bitter and medicinal drink, used for stomach aches, bad eyesight, skin disease, and sleepiness. But during the Tang Dynasty, tea began to develop into a better-tasting drink that people began to drink more leisurely instead of strictly medicine. Tea culture in China started to spread in the form of tea houses and tea gardens. At this time, green tea was the tea of choice. Black tea would not be invented until the 7th century. At the end of the 6th century, tea arrived into Japan and Korea. During the Tang Dynasty in the 9th century, a Japanese monk brought tea plants back to Japan after his travels in China. Tea was also spread by monks on the Silk Road, along with another trading route called the Tea Horse Road, where China and Tibet traded qi for war horses. Tea in Japan was popularized by the Shogun Santomo when he had a hangover so bad he thought he was going to die, until a Buddhist priest brought him a bowl of tea, and it cured his hangover. This information spread tea drinking throughout Japan. Tea culture in Japan is also very present as it is in China. This culture led to the intricate rituals around tea, leading to the creation of the Japanese tea ceremony. During the Ming Dynasty in the 14th century, the Chinese emperor shifted the standard of tea pressed into cakes to loose tea. During the same time, China held a monopoly on the world's tea trees. Tea began to spread into the West during the 17th century, when in 1610, Dutch trades brought the first shipments of tea into Amsterdam. In 1645, tea was introduced into England, but was not an immediate hit. The English did not take to what they saw as a bitter and medicinal drink. England was more keen on coffee at the time until Catherine, the Portuguese princess, who was the queen consort of Charles II. Many credit Queen Catherine of Braganza for popularizing tea with the English aristocracy. At this time, Great Britain was in the midst of expanding their colonial influence. As Great Britain grew, so did their interest in tea drinking. The East India Company was created in 1600 after the charter from Queen Elizabeth I. In 1689, the East India Company was importing tea directly from China. The popularity of tea in the 17th century among the British soared, and tea was sold for 10 times the price of coffee. The fast clipper ship was made by Western trading companies to sail to the East. Europeans started putting milk and honey into their tea, which was seen as an abomination in China. But this was done because a lot of the poorest teapots coming from China were put in the bottom of the ships instead of the tea to avoid it getting wet. But in the process, the teapots were absorbing salt from the water, distorting the taste of the tea, using milk and honey to counteract the salt. Before the arrival of tea in 1610 and coffee in 1582, Europe's preferred to safe beverage was alcohol. Naturally, the Enlightenment followed. Britain was paying for all the tea from China with silver, but when that became too expensive, they started paying the Chinese with opium instead, which was used in morphine and heroin. This started a public health problem in China, as people became addicted to the drug. 1 in every 3 Chinese adults were opium addicts. In order to keep up with the trading of tea and opium, Britain needed access to land and labor to grow opium. The East India Company began to colonize India in 1757, when the company won over the Indians in the Battle of Passa, giving them control over Bengal. In 1839, fed up with the health crisis, a Chinese emperor ordered for large amounts of British opium to be destroyed in retaliation. This act started the First Opium War. Fighting continued along the Chinese coast until 1842, when the defeated Qing dynasty ceded the port of Hong Kong to the British and resumed trading. In 1852, a rebellion against the Qing dynasty started, and in the years after, the British and French triggered the Second Opium War, again defeating China, where they were forced to open up more ports and legalize opium. The British East India Company also wanted to grow tea for themselves, so they commissioned botanist Robert Fortune to steal tea plant. Citizens of China were banned from sharing information or selling of tea plants by the Chinese government in order to keep their monopoly. Robert Fortune managed to smuggle tea into India disguised as a Chinese villager. How he did that exactly, I am not sure, but he did it anyways. While he was there, he learned that all tea came from the same plant, the Camellia sinensis. Previously, the British believed that different teas came from different plants. He learned that the difference in green teas and black teas were in the results of processing. Black tea was fermented while green tea was not. He learned information such as spring harvest develops the best white and green teas, while the fall is the best for oolong. This spread of information helped tea to become an everyday commodity. Tea time in Britain started with the Duchess Anna, and different tea chimes for different classes of people started to emerge. What is known as low tea time, from 4 to 5 p.m., was for higher class people, whereas high tea time, which started from 6 p.m. onwards, was for workers. It was said that even in World War II, British soldiers would stop for their tea. Today, Britain drinks more tea than any other country per capita. One of the more obvious and significant events in American history involving tea was the Boston Tea Party. The people were upset at the high taxation of tea, to put it simply, so in protest they threw tea shipments into the harbor. After this, America switched from being a tea-drinking country to a coffee-drinking one. And the U.S.'s contribution to tea culture was in 1908, was the tea bag, made in New York by a tea seller putting tea in sample pouches, and people were instead throwing the tea along with the pouches into the water. The U.S.'s tea culture is mostly centered around iced tea, which arose in 1904 with the emergence of refrigeration. 80% of tea drinkers in America drink iced tea. Tea in America only grows in two places, those being Hawaii and South Carolina, which started the Lipton Company.
Okay, thank you all for watching my teapots and my teacups. I hope you all enjoyed. Bye.